All right. Right now we have Hurricane Florence skirting the coast of North Carolina. I think it's like 400 some odd miles away, but it should be here tomorrow. In any case, I got to talking to some colleagues today about what are those folks going to do down there at the coast. As a nurse, you understand that your job is to be there. You're not really allowed to kind of leave, or you're not really, your job is not really there kind of temporarily. You're there all the time. So there are ED nurses right this moment preparing themselves for this hurricane, still at, say, Wilmington or Cape Hatteras, Dare County, Pitt County, down there at the coast of North Carolina, getting ready for this. And they're down there staying probably at the hospital or at their facility. This kind of brings up a point that I want to make today. Nurses sometimes don't really get a chance to leave. You don't really get a chance to leave work. Now, I'm here in the northwestern side of North Carolina. I'm not really at the coast. I'm pretty far away from it, actually. So this really isn't going to affect me very much as it is, say, someone, like I said, in Wilmington or down there on the Outer Banks, or people in, say, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. These people are going to be very heavily affected by the weather, and they probably will not get to leave home. They will probably stay at their facility. It's kind of a concerning time if you're a nurse. I have children. Other nurses have children. Other nurses have families. They have lives outside of work. However, at this point in time, they're being told that arrangements are being made for them to stay at said facility. It's a little bit off-putting, if you will. Like I said, fortunately, I'm not one of those nurses at this time. I'm at the other end of the state, so I don't really have to worry about it. But for these nurses that are down there at the coast, I'm sorry. Y'all are there. I'm sorry. Nurses down in Florida, I'm sure that they can relate to this. The nurses down in Texas last year with Hurricane Harvey, I'm sure that they can relate to this. And all this time that these nurses are going to be away from their families, they're still going to have to do their jobs. There was a book, and it might have even become a film, about one hospital down in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit back in 2005. Those nurses had to stay. That medical staff, they had to stay there. They had to stay at that hospital. So there are times where being a nurse, as great as it is, sometimes you have to go through trying times. You have to go through times of maybe not uncertainty, but I bet you're going to have some not happy folks. There was a nursing home, one of the hurricanes last year, maybe Maria. There was a nursing home down there in Florida, and those nurses had to stay. However, temperatures got very bad, and many of their patients actually started to die. I don't really remember how many of their patients died, but those nurses had to stay there, and they couldn't go home. And they also had a very hard time treating their patients. They weren't really able to go home, and yet they also had to treat their patients. And some of their patients were dying, and I don't doubt that they knew their patients for a very long time. Some of them probably did, and it would be just terrible to go through something like that. It would be a very hard time to go through something like that. So, in weather emergencies like what we're having, the governor will call a state of emergency, and it'll bring in some supplies, and people will get to evacuate, things like that. But for a lot of those ICU patients or ED nurses, or whoever it may be, nursing home patients, you can't really get those people out. You have to stay with them. You will have to stay with your patients. So to all those nurses and staff out there, in the eastern part of the state, I wish you good luck. I hate it for you. I wish, something could be done so that y'all could come home. But, I'm sorry. And, to everybody else who hasn't experienced this, as part of being a nurse, if there is bad weather or a natural disaster or, something, you're going to stay at work. You're going to. It's what happens. It's kind of how the game's played, if you will. So, as great as being a nurse is, if it happens where you got to stay at work, it's probably not going to be a whole lot of fun. I've been fortunate enough to where up in my area we don't really get the hurricanes or tornadoes, nothing like that. We do get every now and then we get winter storms, and I've been fortunate enough to make it home sometimes. But I have worked with some nurses that had to stay, at the facility for days because they didn't have the means to get home. They didn't have the ability. So, that's what I got for you today. If inclement weather happens, you may be staying. It's just what happens. Thank you much. We'll see you.